Welcome to another episode of the Health Bridge podcast. This is Holly B, and I'm having a really great conversation today with Tina Demore. I can't wait to introduce her to you. She is a well respected shamanic practitioner and teacher, and she utilizes her training and experience in advanced shamanic techniques such as soul retrieval, curse unraveling, as well as ancestral healing to empower those who struggle with chronic illness and pain. Tina brings her own intense struggle through chronic illness full circle to help others towards healing, balance, and wholeness. With over 15 years of experience as a shamanic practitioner, she empowers those who suffer from chronic illness to make lasting changes in the relationship between themselves and their disease so that they can live in a life that's not overshadowed by illness. She believes that through the process of transmuting our inner poisons, we can create medicines for ourselves and others. I love the conversation that I had with Tina. She is such a positive spirit. She's got such a great energy, and she has so much personal experience to bring to the table. I think when you are someone that has gone through intense or is going through intense chronic illness or struggle of any kind, it's hard to relate to healers or practitioners that haven't experienced something as in depth as you have or that you're going through. And Tina has gone through it all. I mean, she'll get into her story, so I'm not going to share too much of it right here, but she is somebody relatable. She is somebody that has been to the bottom and has learned to pick herself up through the help of her healing spirits and her shamanic practice. So, if you're not familiar with shamanic work, I invite you to listen in to just to learn really the shamanic perspective on illness and the shamanic perspective on healing and how it views illness. It's much different than our current Western mindset around illness and how to treat the body in order to help it heal. And I like to introduce you to these other ideas because healing is multifaceted. For most people, healing doesn't just come from one source. We need to be open to the different ideas and theories and possibilities that are out there for us. So, this is another one that I'm excited to introduce you to. My one request for you before we dive into the program, if you can take 10 seconds to just go ahead and click that little subscribe button for this podcast, it would mean the world to me. It would help both my message and Tina's message get out there further into the world and be listened to by more ears and given the opportunity to change more people's lives just because they were able to come across our podcast that much easier. So if you like what you've heard so far on my podcasts, please do subscribe. It costs you nothing and it helps broadcast this podcast even further. So thank you so much for taking a moment to do that. And now let's dive into the episode. Tina Demore, I'm very excited for this conversation we're about to have. We met recently on Instagram and connected immediately, and I'm so happy to welcome you here to the Health Bridge podcast.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, I wanted to have you on because you have an incredible story of healing through a pretty intense medical diagnosis or experience. I like to say experience. And you went about it in a very different approach, or you ended up, I should say, going about it in a different approach than the standard Western medicine route. And so I want to dive into that. But first off, I'll say you are now a shamanic practitioner. And for people that aren't familiar with what that is or what that means, maybe we could start with sort of how you ended up in that world? I know this is hard to put into a nutshell because it
It, yeah.
expands your life, right?
Right, right. Yes. Good point. Yes.
Yeah. But if you could maybe just give us some of those stepping stones that sort of led towards that. And then I definitely want to hear about your transitions through your different life stages that have, ended up with where you are now.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I don't really call myself a shaman. In the way I was trained, it's seen as bragging. So, and as if you've arrived someplace. I mean, I'm still in a body. Yes, I work with spirit, but I practice shamanism, and that's really it gets my thinking mind out of it. And I'm also a teacher, so I do train people. So how I started this whole journey is really a long story. So I'll try to pick the goodies out of it. I think that I could start when I was a child. I would hear trees speaking. I would feel certain things with the wind. I remember going out in the middle of a lightning storm. My mother did not know I was out. I think I was about 6 years old, and I just felt the hairs on my body rise. And I had experiences like that. I also could speak with animals. I could feel their feelings. And when I realized that not everybody could, there was a big part of me that kind of went, okay, we've got to reel this in and conform. And I was a pretty shy kid. I was very thoughtful and always observing, but I really didn't talk about my experiences. So, fast forward years later, when I became a classroom teacher, I got very sick with a very mysterious illness that basically disabled me. Very strange symptoms that started, the doctors, I did go to the allopathic. I did the allopathic thing first, and I got no help really. I was told, maybe you have lymphoma or non-Hodgkin's or this or that. I mean, they everything under the sun. I went to doctors in Boston who thought I had life-threatening neurological disorders. I mean, spinal tap for MS, Huntington's disease, things like that. All of that came back negative. And I was basically told that this is in your head. So it was a major gaslighting. But I was at the point in my life that I had given so much of my power away that I really started thinking to myself, is there something I need to look at? Am I really making this up? Finally, 2.5, 3 years later, I got a diagnosis. At that point, though, I had already been to an acupuncturist who was like, I think you need to see a shaman. And I said, in Maine, at that time it was 2007. So I really wasn't aware of anybody around. And so I met this woman. And at this point, I was having some really troubling spirit experiences where I was dreaming of these spirits. I was seeing them at the foot of my bed. I literally thought I was losing my mind. And so when I went into this first session with this shaman, she said, this room is filled with these spirits. And I dropped my mouth and I said, you see them too? And she said, yes. And I said, I don't know what to do with this. What's going on? She said, you're being initiated by spirit. And I said, what does that even mean? And, she sat me down and said, if you don't follow this calling, I think you're going to die. And so I sort of sat there and weighed that out. Okay, I guess I've got to listen to this calling, and I don't know how to do that. So I did train with her. And then I got the diagnosis later. So, and it didn't mean that I didn't go into treatment or anything like that. I ended up having tick-borne illness, which was pretty severe. Ended up being a nursing home level of care in a wheelchair for several years. So, that's really typically what's called a shamanic initiation. And, it was daunting. It was hard. I went through emotional, mental, physical pain, spiritual pain. So it was, I had near-death experiences a couple of times, more times than I can actually count, actually. So, I feel at one point, spirit was pretty loud and was like, we need you to pay it forward. We need you to help people like this. And I really balked. I said, this is too much responsibility. I mean, it's enough as a classroom teacher. That's a lot of responsibility. You've got these little lives in your hands, but you're as a practitioner, you've got someone's soul in your hands, literally. And I just didn't know if I was up for it because it's such sacred work. And finally, one day, I had something called dystonia, generalized dystonia. So it looks like a seizure. So sometimes I would have them twice a day, which was completely painful and exhausting. And finally, just one day, I'm like, Uncle, I surrender. What do you want me to do? And interestingly, the illness started to let up a bit, just a bit, until I started to understand what they were asking me to commit to. So long story short, I'd never planned to be a shamanic practitioner. And that's typically how it runs. It's not like anyone wakes up one day and says, I think I want to be a shaman. Because if they knew what that entailed, they'd be like, nah, I'm out. That's just too much. And I obviously never thought I'd be a shamanic teacher either. But now that I look back, it makes sense. So that's sort of my story in a nutshell. And my passion now is to help people that are grappling through, navigating through illness, especially when they've done all the things, they've done all of the physical things, the diet, the treatment, they've done therapy, they've done art therapy, they've done somatic, they've done family constellation, they've done this, that, and the other thing, and they're still not improving. And that's when I like sort of rub my hands together and go, okay, what can we do to help this person? And I want to be sure that I say that none of the healing comes through me. It's working with specific helping spirits that reside in the shamanic worlds. They're transcendental realms. They're compassionate divine beings that I've worked with for 15 years. And so we know each other. We work as one. And when I work with somebody, I don't necessarily say, I think this is the cause of it, because my thinking mind has to be out of it. It's not about me. It's about what my helping spirits show me. And I just have to be kind of on my game to be able to understand what they're showing me and how to untangle, I guess, the imbalance and the incoherence and the discord, I guess, is how they show me illness is. They see it in a very simple way. Of course, in our human minds, it's way more complicated, being in a body. But when they show me, it's like, oh gosh, really? Oh, that's the way they see it it's almost like an orchestra with a couple of instruments playing out of tune. And it's like, oh, my ears, that's really off. So that if you think of the system as a bunch of different, here are the strings, here's the percussion, here are the horns, and they're kind of not playing together. That's what they show me illness looks like. So yeah, hope that's, understandable or explainable.
It sounds like you are basically acting as sort of like the interpreter.
Yeah, I would say a lot of times I use the word translator. You have to translate. Yeah. Yes, I am an interpreter for what they're showing me. Sometimes I'm like, I'll sit there and go, I don't understand what you're showing me. Can you show me another way? Or that doesn't make sense, but I'll just sort of translate what I hear, what I'm being shown, and then it might make sense to the person that I'm doing the work for. So yeah, definitely.
And when you were, sorry, quick question. So when you were talking about going through, what did you call it? The
initiation.
Initiation. Are you saying that the experience of going through this hardship of the illness is that initiation?
Yes. So for some people who are meant to be practitioners, and of course, I want to also include people that are not meant to be practitioners. I mean, they're on some sort of a becoming as well. It's just not to be a shamanic practitioner. It's called the process of initiation or shamanic sickness is becoming the hollow bone or hollow reed, where the spirits choose you for, could be many reasons, but you don't really fully know. You don't really know you're being chosen, but just stuff starts to happen and things happen, and it's not necessarily quote unquote good that you don't have control over it. And so they hollow you out. They bring up all of your fears. They bring up all of the things that are scary for you, and it makes it very real. And I think that somebody once said it's sort of like being in a snow globe and someone just shaking it up. So yes, the initiation is really about becoming. They're molding you into something, and you have to let go at some point and just allow them to do that. And it's sort of this, it's a big leap of faith and of trust. And after you get
Yeah.
to know your helping spirits, after a while, you go, okay, I trust what you see is way more than I can see. But that was my path as a practitioner. And I can say also any practitioner that's really doing the work is constantly being initiated. There's like a sort of a cycle, a life and death cycle, and a rebirth cycle. And I think to a certain extent, everyone goes through that process. We're all part of nature, and nature has its own cycles. But what I noticed most when I started working with people who have chronic illness is that, even if they're not being made into a practitioner, there is some sort of becoming on the other side of illness, as scary as it is. And I don't want to bypass that. I want to make sure people understand it can be real hell and back again. And it can be gut wrenching and heartbreaking, all of the experiences you have. And everybody has different emotions about it. And sometimes they're conflicting. But if they can get into this place of faith in some way, despite everything around them that looks like they've lost everything, if they can get into a space of having faith and trust in something, and it's usually very individual, then there's hope that they might see some sort of light on the other side of it. And that for me, I can't tell you how passionate I get when someone finally says, I'm starting to see the light. And I'm just like, yes, it's really why I'm here. Even my voice is getting crackly, just thinking about that. When someone finally says, I think I'm making some movement, I just get so excited. My heart just expands about 3 times.
Do you feel like patients or clients they come to you before they have a sense of that light at the end of the tunnel?
Yes. I
Mhm.
think a lot of people come to me feeling very desperate. And I remember I was there, just please help me. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm beside myself. And, I want to say, like, it's important to hold space for that experience, feeling that lost, that powerless, that hopeless. We all need to be heard. And I think holding space for somebody in that place is just it's simple, but it's also really healing because they're feeling heard finally. And a lot of the doctors out there aren't really listening. They don't have time, or they just don't want to listen.
Don't have time. Yeah, they don't have time. They don't understand. They understand things on a
Yeah,
logical level.
yeah,
They don't all have the ability to see beyond that, and it's simply not in their training to do so.
it's not. And and I think there are some great doctors out there, and I don't want to bash all doctors. I really don't. I think that allopathic medicine has its place, but when we're overusing it, or when we're just relying on it like a crutch, and not realizing the power of our own healing capacity, that's when we start getting a little lost.
Yeah, I want to touch on that because I think that allopathic medicine is very important. I've had fantastic doctors, I've had worthless doctors.
Yeah,
I've
same.
run the whole range, as I'm sure most people have. But and I want to stress that there's a time and a place for it, and it can also be ongoing with all the other things. But just understand that it is one of the tools in your healing toolbox. It's
Right,
not the only tool.
right.
And if you feel like it's the only tool, I have a sense that that is giving away really some of your own power in your own circumstances. And that's something
Yes,
that we have to be very careful that we don't let go of.
exactly. And it's funny that you say that, because it happens a lot. And it's one of the things I have a path to wellness program that I created. And when I start clients in that program, we talk about how they've given away their power, or how the power might have been taken away. And so, the shamanic way of bringing someone's power back is different, but sometimes we can find it on our own. What we do when someone's lost their power in shamanism is do a power animal retrieval. And that brings, they're loaning the spirit of this animal who typically lived on this earth, is bringing and loaning this power back. And it's usually in the form of this animal, so our hearts can understand what kind of power that is that we're carrying. But yeah, we definitely, that's one of the first things is people lose their power. I remember it. I gave my power away to doctors. And yeah, so that's one way traditionally that you can become ill is by losing power through the shamanic lens.
Mhm.
There's a
And
couple more ways too,
I was
but
going to ask, yeah, I know there's a few different ways. So could you kind of go into those and maybe make
sure.
them relatable so we can sort of understand?
Absolutely. I'll boil it down. So one way is losing power, and that cure, the shamanic cure, is a power animal retrieval. And it gives you courage. It gives you self-empowerment. It helps you stand in your sovereignty. And they're an etheric ally, so you're not alone through the process of being ill. And we can lose our power before we get ill, and that could be why we've gotten ill, or we can continue to lose our power during an illness. Another reason why or how we can get sick through the shamanic lens on the spiritual level is by incurring intrusions. And what intrusions are in shamanism are, not conscious energies that are typically thought forms that we send to each other, or we can send them to ourselves if we have a negative thought about it, if we have an inner critic that's really active and we're feeding it, we can incur our own intrusions. And without getting it too complicated, when we live in this world we call the middle world, the middle world is a spiritual aspect of this world, and it has many intrusions. In fact, if you go a little bit more advanced, the spiritual cause of pollution is from intrusions. So when someone incurs an intrusion, they usually have a localized pain, some weird anxiety. They don't really feel like it's all of a sudden. A lot of empaths can pick up things, and those are typically not theirs. And it's really an intrusion. It gets lodged in the energy body. It can create, it can manifest into some forms of cancer, definitely long-term chronic pain, upper respiratory infections, things like that, GI issues. Migraines are a big one. My grandmother was a pro at undoing migraines through curses. That's another one that I work on too. So the third thing that we can become vulnerable with and start to become sick is from soul loss. And that's when we have an experience that's really negative, our psyche is sort of ingenious in that part of us sort of leaves and checks out, and we don't have to fully be there for that negative experience, which is a good thing. But then a part of us actually leaves to seek safety. And that part of us is called the soul essence. And sometimes it can come back on its own. Other times it gets lost in other dimensions and doesn't know that it's time to come home, or doesn't know how to get home. And of course, home is you. But so people can have soul loss. And because we're having power loss and soul loss, the universe doesn't like a void. And so you get kind of cracked open a bit. And that's sort of where, on the spiritual level, illness can sort of take hold.
Mhm.
There are many other things. Like I said, curses can cause perpetual health issues, relationship issues, financial issues, or all of the above. We can have ancestral unwellness. So all of these things might not even be on our radar at all. So it's good to take responsibility for your healing, but sometimes it's not even something that you would even know to take responsibility for. Like, we don't have common language to describe soul loss in our culture, right? It's some people might know about it, but for the most part, not generally. So that's not our fault. It's something that happens. And so the remedy would be soul retrieval.
Mhm.
And that brings back parts of us, these beautiful, pure parts of us, unaffected by the trauma or the negative event. And it brings them back to us and resituates in our energy system. And I've seen some beautiful, beautiful shifts for people that are just, I don't know, I feel different or whatever. It's just this unrest, this crying, this whatever it is, it's just stopped. It's just, I feel so much better. And that to me is just magic. So,
Mhm. Could you also use the term like energetic cords being attached? Things like
yes.
that. If people are familiar with Reiki, for example, it
Yep.
might be just speaking to these things in different terms.
Yes. So I am a Reiki master teacher. I think I became a master teacher in 2005 and just kind of fell into shamanism, as I said before. And I've just I understand the Reiki aspect. So I would say that a cord, an energetic cord, not all cords are bad, by the way. We all are interconnected. So
Yeah.
we have filaments to people that we love and that are supportive to us. But there are some, and my helping spirits show me, you know, sometimes it needs to be removed or dissolved. I don't really cut them because it kind of leaves a stump, but that would be part of what I do for extraction work when I'm dealing with intrusions, because that's still energy from relationships that we don't need. It's not serving us. And so when my helping spirits are showing me a certain cord, I know that it's time for that cord to go. And there are, again, other cords that are good. They're not all bad. So yeah, that would be extraction work is sort of the body of work that I've done for that.
Yeah. I I find that there are a lot of in from different types of healers that are very similar, a little bit different, maybe in
Yeah,
the way the healing goes about. But
sure.
I think that that concept of energy and the soul loss, these intrusions, this power loss, we can think of them in many different terms
Yeah.
and understand that it can have really deep effects on us, both mentally and physically.
Absolutely. It's pretty magical if I'll see somebody from 1 month and I'll see them 5 weeks later for more soul retrieval. There's something more radiant about them, more present about them. It's really a magical type of healing. And the thing about shamanism is that it's thought to be about 100,000 years old. It hails from every continent, and so not one particular culture has brought this forward. It's really the similarities of these healing techniques that have been passed down through all this time, which I think speaks to the potency of the work. And I think that other people have sort of gone, oh, I really, clearing energy, and so, people can kind of take ideas and do them their own way. But I'm kind of a purist. I don't like to see the work watered down. I've been doing this for over 15 years now, and I love it. And I think that there are other modalities that really are fascinating. Like I said, I have done Reiki. I've also done another couple of modalities, but I always come back to shamanism. The reason I do is because it's a path of direct revelation where I can consult my helping spirits about things and see things in another way that I would never have thought of. That doesn't mean that I don't intuit a lot, because I do. And I think that's a real strength for most people to really feed their intuition. But when I'm really questioning and I don't know exactly what's going on for somebody, I just lean back on my helping spirits. And that's, I think, why the work is a little bit different from other modalities. The helping spirits do come to me, but I mostly go to them and then I bring back healing or information on behalf of somebody else. So that's how the work is a bit different. And I also use, in order to go to those places in the shamanic worlds, I use sound, because sound historically throughout the practice of shamanism they didn't know this, of course, the ancients, but it changes your brain waves into theta. And so it's sort of an access point in your brain and in your psyche where you can allow yourself to go to the other worlds and work with these spirits. So that's how it's a little different. Although, I mean, I kind of, at this point in my life, I'm like, does it benefit? How does it benefit somebody? If it works for somebody, great. Some people might be drawn to other modalities. And I think our own healing paths are our own healing paths. I think everybody has their own way through it. So it really is about what feels right for somebody.
I agree completely.
Yeah,
Things that might work for me might not work the same for you, right?
exactly. Yeah, and that's okay. And it's not that one thing is bad or good. It's just what feeds your soul, what helps you, what heals you. And for me, obviously that was shamanism. It was, and to this day, if I don't do my daily devotion or I don't do my practice on a regular basis, I feel off. And so that's this practice is actually my medicine. So
I love that. In something that I saw you write in one of your blogs, you spoke to illness as an incoherence.
yeah.
And I would love for you to kind of dive into that and tease that out a little bit so we can understand what that means.
Well, yeah. So remember how I said how, the spirits, the helping spirits see show me illness is sort of an orchestra, sort of the strings are out of tune or whatever. You know, the thing is that when we look at illness through our human eyes, we think it's devastating. We think it's all of these things because, frankly, in our world, it is. It can be very harmful. It can be very traumatizing. But when the helping spirits show me, it's really a matter of conflict, inner conflict or outer conflict or incoherence. Something is off. And when you have healings like bringing your power back or getting extraction work done, so your energy, centers are clear, or you have soul retrieval, or you've done ancestral healing, or etc., you start to your systems start to come together again and speak to each other again. There's sort of this transformation that takes place. Sometimes it's very subtle, and sometimes it's really kind of, not subtle. Sometimes it's like, wow, you really responded well to this. So I think that the incoherence is really the imbalance that illness is. And, again, I don't want to oversimplify illness. I don't want to bypass how horrible and heartbreaking it can be, but that's how they see it. And so when you come to a place where you can see something so simple, it's like, oh, wow, my thinking mind is making a lot of this. And so we start to understand that and the way they see it, that becoming well isn't that difficult. It might feel like it to us, but it's not that difficult. It might be, just getting some things into tune. So
Yeah, it's similar in a way, I think, to how ancient Chinese medicine or even Ayurveda looks at the body and looks at this incoherence that goes
yes,
on. And, when you're working with a Western mindset, it's, oh, I have fill in the blank disease,
right,
MS, something like
right,
that. Like this very, very, very complicated,
yes,
hard to
very,
track from day to day, et cetera, et cetera. In traditional Chinese medicine, they might refer to something and they just see the pattern. They
yeah,
recognize
yeah,
the pattern and, oh, this is, all we need to do is treat damp heat or,
yeah,
wind in the system. And it's
right,
like, oh, it's okay. It's not to, again, take away that, yes, it is complicated. Everybody's different. But if we can see from that bigger perspective, just, if we can just treat the patterns,
right, yeah. And
and
there
we
is
know
a
how to
pattern.
treat patterns. Yeah.
Is a pattern with illness, and it's not the same pattern everybody else has. So somebody else with MS or somebody else with lupus might present, as very, very differently. And in the spiritual level, their cure, quote unquote, or their illness itself looks different. And shamanism, like everything's a spirit. So you can communicate with the spirit of the illness. Sometimes it doesn't want to be communicated with. But yeah, there's a different way to go of going about it for sure. And I was going to say too, that sometimes that I know for myself, when I finally got diagnosed, I went through this area or a piece, part of my life, I would say, that I started to give power over to the diagnosis because see, you told me I didn't have anything, that it was in my head, I was making it up. And I finally have this diagnosis. And I know MS takes a while to get diagnosed. I know a couple others do as well. And so when you finally get the diagnosis, there's a part of you that's like, I told you so. I know my body.
You feel
But
justified
you do. And that's great.
and
You
freed.
knew it. You knew
Mhm.
there's something going on. But the problem becomes when we latch onto it, like I did this myself, and every single symptom that I had, I attributed to my illness. And that just fed it. It just gave it more power until, it almost killed me several times. So I
Mhm.
realized how I was feeding that illness. And it's not to say that maybe will you be giving your power away to it? Will you be, there's that quote, Michael J. Fox. I love this quote. So Michael J. Fox, who's one of my honest to goodness heroes because of what he went through or what he's going through is a lot of what I went through, the neurological issues. I couldn't stand. I would fall all the time. I was in a wheelchair. But I love his attitude. He says, I often say now, I don't have any choice whether I have Parkinson's, but surrounding that non choice is a million other choices that I can make. And so, what I love about that is he's not giving his power away to it. He's accepting the illness, but he's not giving us, yeah, I don't have a choice about that, but I have other choices I can make. And that's his power. So I really love that.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit because you mentioned briefly before when you were talking about going through your process. I think you did talking about grieving, that sense of grieving when you get diagnosed with something, or maybe you just have a big life change, maybe a relationship ended or a job ended or something like that, or this
Yeah.
just incredible sense of injustice, right?
Yeah.
That what we
Mhm.
thought was going to be our life
Yeah.
all of a sudden isn't. And we have to go through that anger and that grief
Oh,
of,
yeah.
of the loss
Mhm.
first.
Yeah.
And before we can move through and, shift our perspective on it and shift
Mhm.
our experience with it, right?
Yeah, and it's not easy work. I mean, it's not like I think I'll grieve this for a few days and I'll be over with. I mean, it's deep. I mean, this is affecting parts of your life. You may lose your partner because of it. You might lose some friends that just don't have a stomach to watch you go through this. Obviously, it affects you financially. You're not able to work full time. You could lose your home. I went through a point of time where I couldn't drive because of my neurological symptoms. So yeah, it was, I think for everybody, you're going to go through some anger, a lot of anger, because sometimes you might blame the creator, you might blame, or you go through all of those things, and it's not a pretty ride, but I think it's necessary. If you repress any of those things, they're just going to pop up and tap you on the shoulder sometimes. So, feeling the feels is what you need to do. Feeling is healing, right? It's easier said than done. But when you really let go of who you thought you were going to be, who you thought what you thought your life was going to look like, when you really sit there and grieve and let go of it, then you make space for something different. And then you surrender. You surrender. And that's a big act. It's courageous because, look at the track record. I try, this is what my life was supposed to look like. And now it's not. And how am I supposed to trust my life now? How am I supposed to trust my body? And some people feel like their bodies betrayed them, right? But if you can get in this space of understanding, okay, there might be another life on the other side of this, let's get curious about that. I know for myself, I wasn't even 40 yet. I think I was in my late 30s, and I'm sitting there in a wheelchair, dependent on others, at nursing home level of care. I needed 24/7, you know, care, somebody to look after me because they didn't know if I was going to go into a generalized dystonic episode. I might get stuck there for 2 hours without medication if I were by myself. And sometimes I would stop breathing because they would lock up my diaphragm. So I sat there and just, am I going to be dependent on somebody for the rest of my life? I mean, I'm not even 40 yet. I didn't get to do this. I didn't get to do that. All of those places that I had to grieve. But then something inside me one day, I said, am I going to be like this for the rest of my life? And then something inside me went, hell no. I just no. And so, okay, I had this inner dialogue. If this is not the rest of my life, what other life can I dream up? Because it's either this or I'm dead, or there's something else on the other side. And what is that? And I had to feel into it. I couldn't see it at first. I had to feel into that and sort of create some major manifesting about what I wanted my life to look like, and still surrender because you can't control everything. So it was part of me surrendering to my helping spirit, surrendering to the universe, and to my illness as a teacher, as a real tough love teacher, and going, okay, you got my attention. I'm letting this go. What's next? And that I think was pivotal, and it changed a lot for me. It changed everything. And so when I'm working with someone and I can, see them in that space, it's magic because that's like the potency right there of what is in store for me, the possibilities, and the hope comes back. That's big. Hope.
It's
Oh,
huge. Yeah,
yeah.
hope is huge. And I think that surrendering to the process doesn't mean like giving up. It doesn't
No.
mean not continuing with medical treatment. It
No.
doesn't mean
Right.
any of those things, right? It means surrendering to all of the possibilities that could mean death or continued illness,
Good.
or it could mean 100 other things. So
Exactly.
opening your mind to the 100 other things and being able to accept the bad and the good and flow between the two, I think is
Yeah.
key. Being flexible.
Being in the space of allowing and not fighting. I mean, I fought and fought and fought and fought. And then I'm like, I'm so tired. I can't fight anymore. And I didn't know there was another way until I finally let go and allowed this experience to kind of take me. Yeah, it's not easy. Because I think our culture is like fight, fight, fight. It's surrender. When you allow, it's a very feminine process. It's not something that's a rational thing that we would think of. Oh, am I going to give up fighting? No, you're not giving up. You're fighting in a different way. I guess you could say it. You're fighting for your life in a different way. It's not against the current, it's with the current, like you kind of said a moment ago.
I think that's a perfect way of putting it. I hate the terms like, the whole hashtag hustle culture,
Yeah,
or, I'm going to battle this disease. I'm
right.
fighting every day. And to me, energetically, you're just perpetuating the problem.
Right.
Guess that probably can, you know, be, I guess it can kind of depend on the person, right?
Sure.
Some people need a certain mindset to really motivate themselves through things. So I can appreciate that. But at least for me and just in general, it seems it's not going with the flow. It's not going with acceptance. It's not going with surrender. But I think oftentimes we have to start there,
Yeah.
because we don't know how else to start,
Right.
you
And I
know.
think too, when we think of illness as sort of a teacher, like it or not, right? Then we go, okay, teacher, what are you trying to teach me? And then we're allowing a bit. We're not stuck in this battle. We're listening. We're present. And it's a huge shift. And you're right. I mean, I was a fighter. I fought for a while. And I realized, the same thing over and over. I was banging my head against a wall, and it finally hit me. And I think it was my helping spirits going, are you done yet? Are you going to listen to us yet? Or, but I'm a determined person. And I think a lot of people are, and we don't give up easily. I just didn't realize that surrendering wasn't giving up. It was allowing what was happening to take place. Yeah.
We want to win. We're in a culture of winning, right?
Yeah.
If you're not winning, then you're failing. But
Right.
we finally have to get to a point where winning actually means flowing and acceptance.
Exactly. It's a very different way. It's like I said, very feminine. I mean, we've been fighting since the Iron Age. It's a long time that this has been ingrained in our culture, but this is a different way of being and understanding. And I think that when you're being asked whether you're becoming a shamanic practitioner, or you're becoming something like a health coach, or something else that the universe is asking of you, you have to surrender to this becoming. There is an essence of trust that you have to sink into.
Another visual that I have is the toddler that is just
Huh.
fighting and throwing tantrums because they want the thing,
Yeah.
and mom and dad are like, sorry, you can't have the thing, and they throw another tantrum,
Yep.
and it just goes on and on, and parents are just sitting there like, eventually she'll get tired of
Yeah.
fighting.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of like the relationship I had with my helping spirits. They're just sitting there going, okay, we got you, but is this out of your system yet? It's so the same thing. I mean, I've often wondered how the helping spirits see, me or any other human, like just going, oh, it's so easy. It's just right there, but you're fighting it.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So
I think that we have to understand too, those helping spirits, God, whatever you believe in, they're always there waiting to help.
they are. They
They're
are.
not going to abandon.
No. And I think that, we like to make up stories. Our brain loves to make up stories. And when we're sick, especially, we make a story up in our head about how this all happened. And, we have to go through that. I feel like we have to feel all of it, like I said. But when we can start seeing that there is a force that is on our side and that is sort of setting up these obstacles for you so that you can see it too. You could see the magic within you. I think that's what this is all about. I mean, we are made with so much love. We can't even imagine how much love we're made with and how much thought, divine thought has gone into our creation. And we live in this place where we're forgetting that all the time. We forget our worth, we forget our magic, we forget our potential. But when we can dip into that and realize that, we're more than our story. We're more than what we tell ourselves. And if you can fully, fully believe, even if starting to believe that it's possible to be well again, then the whole world, it just opens up for you. And I know that sounds so simple, and it's not to diminish anybody's experience, but if you believe it, it will be. And it's that way for any kind of beliefs that something might take you or make you worse, or if it's a possibility within you that there's a life for you on the other side. The universe will listen, will hear you.
So if somebody has their interest peaked now in trying out the shamanic realm and
Yeah.
seeing what healing there might be for them in this realm, how do they start? How do they find a practitioner? Obviously, there's you, but how does one kind of start to maneuver in there if they don't have any other references?
That's
If
such
they
a good question.
yeah.
There are a lot of shamanic practitioners. I don't know what's happened in the past 4 years, but it's all of a sudden come out of the woodwork. You really want to look for somebody that is really well trained and knows what they're talking about, and this is my opinion, but doesn't call themselves a shaman, because in my training it's a bit egoic. So you really want to feel into whether there's a resonance for you with the person that you're choosing to work with. And I say give it a try. Give it a try. If you're curious, try it. It may really knock your socks off. So that's sort of where I stand with that. You just want to be discerning about the person you choose to work with your energy. You want to make sure that they're well trained, that they really know what they're talking about, that they have an integrity, that they don't want to water the practice down, that that they want to carry the practice through. And I think another part of that is to empower the person that's receiving the healing. This work isn't about me. It's about empowering somebody. And so look for somebody like that is looking to help you, not by creating a dependence, but helping you be really sovereign. And so I think that would be the best advice I could give somebody when they're looking for a practitioner.
And if somebody wants to reach out to you, maybe to learn more or to potentially work with you, where do they find you?
My website is 3 Crows Healing with a numeral 3. And, they can get in touch with me that way, probably peruse a bit, learn more about how I see illness, how I work with illness, how I work with you, as a listener, if you are interested. 3 Crows Healing.
Perfect. And I'll link that in the show notes for everyone. And then I guess my last question is there anything that's come up recently with your healing spirits? Any messages that's been coming up over and over that you feel like you should share with our audience?
That's such a good question. Well, I was sharing a moment ago, something came up within the last couple of weeks, really working with people, is we were talking about it, surrender, the power of surrender, and also how much love that we are made of that we forget in this mundane world. So I think those are the most recent things. Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you. I
Of
just am
course.
stumped.
I know I forgot to prepare you with that ahead of time.
It's okay. No, yeah, I think that remembering how much we are loved
Mhm.
as we are is really
Right.
the most recent development. when I've been working with them. Yeah.
I think that's so beautiful to end with because that still applies. It's important to understand that that still applies, even if we are relatively alone, even if we don't
Yeah.
have family or friends around us. If we're single or we feel like we're going through this transition by ourselves, we're not. We just have to open our heart and our minds to faith. I think
The
that there
possibility.
is more out there.
And I get it. There's some people that have lost faith, and that's a really hard place to be in, especially when everything around you is showing you that uh, there isn't enough love. I mean, there's an abundant lack culture. And so when we're sort of like, well, we got to see it to believe it. And it's depressing if you see just the lack. But we're more than that. We're way more than that.
And I think the key with faith and the key with hope is it's not seeing it to believe it. We have to believe it to see it.
Yeah.
And that sounds so cliche. It's something that we probably hear all the time, but it's
It
in
is.
my experience, it's the absolute truth.
It
It's
really is.
for the process.
It is crucial. And there's a way to get that faith back. I mean, it might be a couple of things, but it's not hopeless if there is a lack of faith. I mean, I was there, lack of faith in what was going on for me, but it's possible for it to come back. It really is.
Mm-hmm. And I think starting with just such a simple daily practice of looking for three things that you appreciate or that you're grateful for each day.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can just
Or
be for a comfortable pillow on your bed,
yeah, grateful
cozy
is a good
blanket.
thing. The other thing I love is something that you can count on, like the sun rising. Really simple. Or the moon coming in every month, full moon or new moon. Those are things that are dependable because sometimes our lack of faith is because people have let us down. And so, coming back to this place of I can trust myself. I can trust that the sun's rising or seasons are changing, as well as gratitude. Gratitude is always good medicine.
I love that. Well, Tina, this has been such an awesome conversation. I
Yes, it
really,
has.
I really appreciate having you on, and everyone that's listening. I hope they follow you and listen to your podcast as well. We'll put a link to that down below. And thank you so much for sharing your story.
I'm just honored to be here. Thank you for asking me. It was a pleasure.
All right. How did that conversation sit with you? It was a lot that we went over, and it might be one that you need to listen to a couple times to sort of let these concepts settle in if you're not familiar with them already. The one key point that I want to touch on again that I think is so important is the idea that she said, how are you feeding your illness? Oh, I mean, that can be broad. How are you feeding your illness? What thoughts are you having around your illness? What are you telling yourself about your illness? What are you telling yourself that your illness means? What outside perspectives are you allowing in to define your experience? Social media, the news, other people's perspectives. Just what are you allowing into your space? And is it feeding your illness and intensifying it? Or is it feeding your illness to nourish and rebalance? I want you to use that perspective when you are just going throughout your day and kind of check in with yourself multiple times a day and just say, how is this feeding me? How's this feeding my illness? How is this feeding my health mentally, physically? So I'm going to leave you with that food for thought and ask you to please share this episode with anyone that you think might be receptive to this idea or might appreciate learning more about this topic. Healing takes so many different paths, as we spoke to on the episode, and this could be the right path for someone. And this could be the right moment for them to start that journey if they were exposed to it. So think about that and think about sharing this episode. We would really appreciate it. It would, again, get our message out further. And if we can help someone with this podcast, that's all we can ask for. So thank you for listening. I'm so honored that you are here. And I will see you soon on another episode of the Health Bridge podcast.